You ever randomly remember a cartoon from your childhood and think, wait, did that actually exist or did I just imagine it? Well, you're not alone. There were so many weird, fun, and sometimes downright creepy cartoons that disappeared over time. You might remember many of them, but you may have forgotten some very good ones. If you forgot them, I will remember them for you. And if you still remember them, enjoy their nostalgia. The last ones are the best, so stay until then, starting with the ones you still remember. If you grew up watching Cartoon Network in the early 2000s, chances are you remember this one. Codename. Kids Next Door was a cartoon about a secret organization run entirely by kids, dedicated to fighting adult tyranny. Every episode was basically a high-stakes spy mission, except instead of high-tech gadgets, they used ridiculous inventions made from everyday junk, like soda-powered jetpacks and mustard ray guns. We had the badass leader, number 1, Nigel Uno, the spiffing Brit mastermind. Number 2, Hoagie Gilligan, the tech genius and pun enthusiast. Number 3, Kooky Sambin, the rainbow monkey-loving wild card. Number 4, Wallaby Beetles, the hot-headed fighter. And number 5, Abigail Lincoln, the coolest and smartest of the bunch. The show ran for 6 seasons from 2002 to 2008 and even had a huge finale called Operation Interviews, where we finally saw what happened to our favorite operatives. But here's the thing, after the show ended, creator Tom Warburton actually had plans for a Galactic Kids Next Door spinoff, expanding the series into space. There was even a secret pilot floating around the internet, but for whatever reason, Cartoon Network never picked it up. After this cartoon, everyone wanted to be a spy and have a treehouse. I even tried to make one myself. Well, it didn't work out. Some might forgot it. But compared to some of the next cartoons on this list, this one's practically mainstream. Now let's move on to a show that's a little more forgotten and a lot weirder. Again, in the early 2000s, there has another show you might remember.
Well, he used to live in the sea, but he had another plan, so he packed up all his things and he moved himself to land.
Kenny the Shark was about, well, a shark. But not just any shark, a talking tiger shark named Kenney, who decided to leave the ocean and live as a suburban pet. His owner? A 10-year-old girl named Kat, who was somehow the only person who could understand him. While most kids wanted a dog, Kat ended up with a 700-pound fish-eating roommate who had to resist the urge to snack on the family goldfish. The show ran from 2003 to 2005 and had a fun mix of comedy and weird slice-of-life moments. But despite its unique concept, Kenny the Shark never really stuck around. Maybe it was because Discovery Kids didn't have the same reach as Nickelodeon or Cartoon Network, or maybe a shark as a house pet was just too bizarre for most audiences. Whatever the reason, Kenny the Shark quietly disappeared, and most people forgot it even existed. The next one is quite sinister. I am talking about the Cramp twins. This one wasn't exactly your typical Saturday morning fare. Sure, it had the classic, over-the-top antics of most cartoons, but there's always something a little off about it. The show centered around 2 brothers, Wayne and Lucien Cramp, who couldn't have been more different. Lucien, the sweet, nerdy one, and Wayne, the troublemaking bully. Those 2 were locked in a constant battle for parental affection. But what really set the Cramp twins apart was its darkly quirky humor, which often crossed into sinister territory. The show felt almost like a fever dream, with its bizarre, exaggerated characters and settings that seemed straight out of a twisted, parallel universe. The world was strange, the animation was odd, and there was always a sense of discomfort in every episode. Whether it was the genuinely creepy villains or the way Wayne would sometimes act downright malicious, you couldn't shake the feeling that this was a world that didn't quite play by the rules. It only ran for 4 seasons from 2001 to 2004, and for some, it remains a hidden gem of early 2000s animation. One of those shows that left you wondering if you'd just imagined the whole thing. If you remember it, there was something a little off. The next one have had such a good intro. I am talking about Dave the Barbarian.
Barbarian, 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 barbarian.
I remember this catching song even today. The cartoon was set in the medieval kingdom of Ugg. It followed the adventures of Dave, a bumbling yet good-hearted barbarian, who was supposed to be the kingdom's protector. But here's the twist. Dave wasn't exactly your typical muscle-bound hero. He was more interested in avoiding violence, knitting, and spending time with his family than swinging swords. What really set Dave the Barbarian apart was its sense of humor. It combined the over-the-top antics of a classic adventure show with a healthy dose of absurdity, slapstick comedy, and unexpected references to pop culture, all wrapped in a medieval setting. Dave's sister, Fong, was a fierce warrior in contrast to his pacifistic ways, while his younger sister, Princess Xandra, was more interested in beauty and romance than ruling a kingdom. And then there was Uncle Oswidge, the slightly off-kilter wizard, who always seemed to get caught up in Dave's chaotic adventures. The show only ran for 2 seasons from 2004 to 2005, but it made a lasting impression with its unique blend of quirky animation and offbeat humor. Despite its short run, Dave the Barbarian left us with plenty of weird, wacky memories, if you remember it at all. Compared to some of the other shows on this list, it's one of those rare gems that somehow never quite found its mainstream footing, but always managed to stick with you in the weirdest way possible. The next one is also a bizarre cartoon.
Mama had a chicken. Mama had a cow. Dad was proud. He didn't care how. Cow.
Cow and Chicken was a show about a talking cow who was actually a superhero and a talking chicken. 2 siblings living in a world where logic didn't really apply. But then you had the red guy, a character who wasn't just your typical antagonist. Whether he was a devilish trickster or something even more disturbing, his presence on the show was always a bit unsettling. His ability to constantly shift between bizarre roles, like a teacher, a bad influence, or even just a creepy neighbor, made him feel less like a cartoon villain and more like something straight out of a nightmare. When I was little, he really scared me. Maybe not as creepy as Courage, the cowardly dog. I know many of you were not let to watch this cartoon because of how it was. Now, maybe you'll say you haven't forgotten this cartoon, and you are right. But I wanted to put it here because it marked that period. What made Cow and Chicken really stand out, though, was its ability to blend the absurd with the sinister. The show was full of twisted humor, offbeat animation, and characters who acted in ways that didn't always feel appropriate for kids' television. It was a cartoon that could leave you feeling both confused and slightly disturbed. The next one is quite hated by the studio.
Rudy's got the chalk.
Chalkzone was a unique animated series that aired on Nickelodeon from 2002 to 2008. The show followed Rudy Tabutai, a 10-year-old boy who discovers a magical piece of chalk that lets him enter Chalkzone, a world where everything ever drawn in chalk comes to life. Alongside his best friend Snap and classmate Penny, Rudy embarks on creative adventures while avoiding dangers like rogue chalk creatures and his strict teacher who despises cartoons. Despite its creative premise, fun animation style, catchy music, and one of the best intro songs, Chalkzone was mishandled by Nickelodeon with delays, bad time slots, and a rushed final season. Next we have a creepy cartoon, but for a different motive.
My name is Angela. Hey, hello. Welcome to my very own show. I'll introduce my friends to you. Oh no, it's Minnie Pooh.
Angela Anaconda had one of the strangest animation styles ever. Cut out, black and white paper doll faces on brightly colored bodies. It looked unsettling, and if you ever saw it, you probably remember feeling just a little creeped out. The series followed Angela, a quirky and dramatic girl with a wild imagination, as she clashed with her snobby rival, Nanette Minor. Most episodes featured Angela slipping into daydreams where she got revenge on Nanette in bizarre, exaggerated ways, often turning her into some grotesque creature. Despite airing from 1999 to 2001, and even getting a Digimon, the movie short Angela Anaconda never really became a classic. Its strange visuals and over-the-top storytelling made it a love it or hate it kind of show, and for many, it's just a distant, eerie memory. The animation wasn't for me, maybe is different with you. The next one is quite different and not so popular.
It's the word on the street.
Skatoony was a cartoon in which kids competed against cartoons characters. Hosted by the fast-talking Chud Chudders and his grumpy producer the Earl, the show had contestants answering rapid-fire trivia questions while dealing with random challenges and chaotic cartoon antics. Originally a British-Canadian production, it aired on Cartoon Network in the early 2010s, but never really caught on like other CN shows. The mix of live action and animation was unique, but let's be real, most Cartoon Network fans weren't tuning in for a quiz show, I being one of them. So, like many weird experiments, Skatoony faded into obscurity. On the other hand, Oscar's Oasis 2011 was a wordless, slapstick cartoon about a scrappy lizard trying, and failing, to survive in a brutal desert. Every episode saw Oscar desperately searching for food and water, only to be thwarted by the harsh landscape, or a trio of mischievous scavengers, a fox, a vulture, and a hyena. The show's bright 3D animation and chaotic Looney Tunes-style humor made it stand out, but it never quite hit mainstream recognition. If you remember it, you probably recall the sheer frustration of watching Oscar almost succeed, only for everything to go horribly wrong. I like this cartoon pretty much for using the Roadrunner concept and not making the main character annoying. And the last one is one that you sure loved, but like many on this list, was a little weird. Socki Chooks 2008 was one of Cartoon Network's strangest experiments, an over-the-top kung fu action show starring 3 martial arts chickens. Yes, really. Set in a futuristic shopping mall, the series followed Chucky-chan, K.O. Joe, and Chick P as they fought against the evil Dr. Wasabi, a villainous pufferfish with a ridiculous army of monkeys. With its bizarre premise, fast-paced action, and exaggerated 3D animation, Socki Chooks felt like a fever dream. It only lasted 1 season before disappearing into obscurity, but if you remember it, you know how weirdly unique it was. Even so, I liked it pretty much, mostly because of the animation, even though it gave me a strange sentiment. Most of these cartoons aren't forgotten, but I wanted to remember them to you, because some of them have good reboots that are actually good. See the video on the screen, like and subscribe for part 2.